Hello everyone, Fanta here, and you're watching Fantavision. Welcome back to another episode of Tales from Retail, and this week, of course, is covering GameStop. This week's topic covers something that a lot of people probably don't think about when they think of working at GameStop or any store in general that has to do with media, and that's Overstock. And with GameStop, unlike other places that when you get shipped something, you can kind of tell if you're going to have overstock or not. When you're working at GameStop, it's a lot more difficult to predict because you could have a day where you're just constantly getting trade-ins of the same game. And because of that, you have to try to figure out how to remedy the situation of running out of space in those drawers because you only have so much space in those drawers behind the cash register. I mean, you think you could fit like thousands and thousands and thousands of games in there, and you do fit quite a lot, especially because you have the two gutted copies out there on the floor, and then you've got those two copies that are then in the yellow sleeves, which makes you have a lot more room in the drawers. And then you also have, after those first two, you have the game inside the case, and those games inside the case take up way more space than in a yellow sleeve, obviously. So what do you do when you start running out of space in those drawers? Our solution was to take a game that wasn't selling particularly well, and if you have 5 or more cases, like games within the case, inside these drawers, you bundle them up with rubber bands and you put them in the back and you try to keep those alphabetized. So because of this, we had to take all of the marketing that we had in the back, all of the extra shelves, and we had to start consolidating. We had to move everything around, and we had to start making it so we could have these bundles of games alphabetized in the back. And before we get any further, I know people want to know what I'm drinking, and today I'm drinking something that I actually didn't think I was drinking. I thought I was drinking the pomegranate one, but I guess I'm actually drinking the lemon berry shandy, which is a Weiss beer. Weiss? I'm guessing it's German, so German pronunciation would be Weiss. Brewed with honey and blackberry juice and natural flavor. Leinenkugel is really good. I like it. This isn't my favorite flavor. It tastes a little bit too fruity for me. It doesn't have that light fruit flavor that I like a lot more in beers that have that fruit flavor. Like the New Belgium Citradelic kind of has a light orange flavor to it. I compare it a lot to Blue Moon because I'm going too far with the beers. The point is it's a little bit too fruity, but it's not bad. So that's what I'm drinking today. I didn't do the usual pop tab intro. I just did me drinking because this is the second time I'm shooting it because there's just like construction going on inside this house. So hopefully I can get through this video without getting interrupted again. Back to the topic. So why am I even talking about Overstock? I mean, a lot of people know about Overstock, but GameStop has so many different levels of Overstock. It's hilarious. I mean, you have the usual new Overstock that you can kind of account for before it comes in because you can see how much you're getting shipped, unless it's coming from a different store, because then I don't think you can. In the new category, there's not just games, but there's also systems. And same with the used category, there's also systems. And there's also defective that you have to worry about getting too much of. Now, most of the time, we had time to ship the defective stuff out. But if you didn't, you had to go back to the system room, which was kind of a claustrophobic, smaller than a walk-in closet type room that was pretty tall though, so you had to get a ladder if you wanted to get to the top, and it was just full of systems, like wall-to-wall systems, and it went, like I said, all the way to the top, and this was like a really freaking high room, and I'm tall and I still couldn't reach the top without a stepladder. So you've got all these different systems in there already, and these are new and used. You've got the new on one side and the used on the other. And if we're getting too many defective things in and we need to make room in the defective area, we'd have to section off part of that back room for defective. So we then have to take the used systems, you'd have to move those over, and then you'd have to get those systems put where they need to be so that they're not going to get stolen. Another thing is with Overstock was when you change generations. A lot of people don't know this, but whenever a new console generation comes out, you get a hell of a lot of trade of the old generation. And because the new generation is coming out, nobody's buying the old generation anymore. So when we're working there, we just got so many Xbox 360s towards the Xbox One and so many PS3s towards the PS4. And it was just crazy how many used systems were filling up our back room and how many games we had to start consolidating to the back, like I mentioned before, with the alphabetizing. And the thing is with the alphabetizing is if you need to get that game on that row because that's the letter it belongs in, you then have to move all of the other rows, which is fine when it's a singular game on the wall out in the front of the store. But when it's back in the back and they're giant clusters of 5 games, and you have to go start from the bottom, move it over, and then take from that row, move that down, move that over. Because originally we had breathing room and it wasn't that big of a deal. And we're like, oh, just, throw it on that shelf, whatever, we were fine. But as the generation moved along and more people kept trading in their 360 games, especially the crappy games that nobody was buying, like Too Human, like Gears of War is not a crappy game. We just got 1 million copies of it. And it just started building up to a crazy degree. Because we did actually have drawers in the back where we kept Overstock for a while, along with Overstock of empty cases. But we then had to move all those empty cases to the bottom drawer as much as we could fit. What we couldn't fit, we kept on a different shelf, but we started filling that area up with used game Overstock. And then when pawn laws changed in our area, we were required to keep every single trade-in for a certain amount of days. Now, this was only lasted for like a month or two, but it still applied to systems and I believe it was iPods, which are smaller things to deal with, but still a pain in the ass. I'll explain in more detail what pawn law is, what the hell I'm talking about in a future episode, but when we had to take games and put those in the back for a certain amount of days, and some stores still have to do this, we then had to not only change how we had the entire back room, because we had already done that once for all those used games, because before we just had the entire back wall covered in extra shelving for out there or just back here in general. We then had to spread out all these extra shelves along the entirety of the back room. We then had to move that entire section of used games over to the other side of the back room, because then we had to have a pawn area where we had to keep the dates tracked on every single one of those trade-ins. Now, it would print out on the sticker, but it was a lot easier if you tried to clump them and keep them together so you could keep track of what day the games are going to come back out of pawn, so you could process them in the morning so you could get those back on the sales floor. Which games still had like up to, I think it was like 20 days you had to hold on to these things. And that's because of theft, I mean, it makes sense because theft is definitely a problem, and GameStop is kind of a pawn shop in a certain way. I mean, you can't pawn something, but you can sell stuff. So some people did steal from Walmart next door or steal from their parents or their brother or stuff like that. So when that kind of thing happened, especially when we started taking in iPods, iPhones, stuff like that, it became a real issue, and pawn law, I think, is when that really started kicking off. So the thing is when you have overstock of all of these different things, you really need to keep track of them. And that's also kind of playing into the previous episode with the endless shipments, because we'd really try to ship off those extra games to other stores that needed it. And unfortunately, we didn't like doing this to people, but we kind of needed to sometimes. Like if they requested a game, we'd give them a bunch of it. We became the distribution center. every GameStop became the distribution center. Like I said, how you requested or you started selling well in one game and the distribution center sent you a bunch. We started getting called on for that kind of thing, and other stores started getting called on that kind of thing. And we would just be shipping massive amounts of these games to other stores, and they'd be shipping a massive amount back of whatever we were low on. And it was just this back and forth of Overstock. And it was really funny. But at the same time, you got to wonder how much GameStop was losing in shipment because all these stores, including the distribution center, was just trying to get rid of stock as much as they could. Because nobody wants a back room full of games that nobody's buying. It's just taking up room from all the marketing that we had before. We had great storage areas. We had everything kind of figured out. And then when we had to make this great move, it was such a pain in the ass. We lost so much cool marketing. And instead of being neatly organized and easy to find, it was all shoved in a freaking cardboard slat. So whenever marketing season came around, you're trying to look for what you need, and you'd have to open this big cardboard, thin box to go through it all again because you don't have it hanging up on the wall anymore. Oh man, the overstock in that store. The worst part of Overstock was when you had to deal with the actual drawers having too much stuff. Because if you don't have because what you needed to do to bring it to the back is have 5 cases with a game in it, 2 guts, and then you like to leave at least 1 game in the case inside those drawers. So if you didn't have those 5 games and you're still running out of space, we had to come up with another creative way to create space in those drawers because we literally did not have any extra space at all. It's not like we could just, we'll just use that empty one over here. There were no empty drawers back there. They were all full to the brim. I don't know if you've noticed this, but the next time if you do shop at GameStop, let's try to see if they're just struggling because we got to a certain point, especially when we still had all those DS cases, we would be struggling to get games out and get games in, and it was just a mess. So what we started to do to solve the problem of too many game cases in the drawers is a couple different things. One was a really cool and unique idea by my manager. He actually, I don't know if they pennied out or he bought them himself or wrote them off. I don't know what he did, but during the holidays, we carried those game towers where you can kind of store your games horizontally. So he bought these things, they're these towers, and he'd put live games into these towers right next to the cash register. Now, you might be thinking, well, Fanta, those are going to get stolen. Now, these games were under $5, so it wasn't a huge deal if they got stolen, and they're right next to the cash register, and they're on camera. And they can see that they're on camera. So no one's going to risk their livelihood for a $5 or less game. And I said it was a smart idea because think about when you're shopping at a grocery store, like at Safeway or Walmart, and they've got candy bars or those stupid little toys next to the cash registers. The reason they have those there is because while you're sitting there waiting and checking out, you might think, I might need a box of Tic Tacs, and they're only 99 cents. And it was the same kind of thing with these games on these shelf things. And they'd just start looking at the games, especially during the holiday season. They'd be looking at games and go, I've never played Crackdown before. I'm like, Crackdown's freaking amazing. It's $1.99. Get that game. And not only did they get Crackdown at that point, because that game is freaking amazing, but that also helped us sell the game, so we now can put up another copy of Crackdown, which then alleviates the problem of having too many of that cheap game in our drawers. It also adds to the average amount of items you have per transaction, which is one of the main things they look at during the holidays. I don't know if I touched on that during my GameStop goals thing, but that was one of the main things they looked at. They kind of shoved aside pre-orders a little bit, and they started making number of items sold, profit, stuff like that, more of a focus. And those towers next to the cash register were genius, because this was before the days of GameStop having a bunch of stupid crap everywhere, like those pop figures, Monopoly, t-shirts, dumb stuff like that. We were a game store. So if you want to sell more games, you want to sell more products, You put it right there next to the cash register, and believe me, we sold a ton of games off of those shelves. Genius idea. The other thing we did was we would just add more guts to we'd add more empty cases to out there. So if it was a popular game like Call of Duty, we might have like 5 or 6 cases out there, especially during the holiday season. And this also helped alleviate the problem of those overflowing shelves. So you've got like a couple extra copies of Call of Duty or a couple extra copies of the newest Halo. Might as well take that yellow sleeve out of that case, put the yellow sleeve with the other ones, and put that extra case up there. People are thinking of buying the game anyway. And the thing is we always had those games that were the featured sales. I mean, the sales at GameStop are shit. They've always been shit. And I might do an episode on that as well. We would just take those cases that were the gutted copies, and we'd put them over or behind. And now we put them over the sale case, which is just a fake case. And that would also alleviate our problem. And we'd still be showcasing what games are on sale that month or that week. So there are just so many great ways to alleviate that problem. But the main issue and the main pain in the ass, really, the only gripe I had about Overstock, because overstocking itself, I'm just kind of explaining it at this point. It's not like I'm really complaining about it. The main thing that sucked were just those giant groups of games, and when we had to deal with pawn law and all that crap. So that's just kind of what it was like dealing with overflow at that store. I'd been to other stores that were much worse organized. Ours was one of the more organized stores. We didn't have a ton of foot traffic. I mean, we had enough. We were making a profit. We were doing pretty well. But other stores that saw a higher number of people, just a higher volume store, their back rooms were a mess. And even the front of the store was a mess because they had so many cases, even on the wall, that they had to have a bunch that were spined. So you just have rows and rows and rows. So you'd have 2 different alphabetical orders, and oh my god, and they're overstock. And their drawers were ridiculously tight. Like I said, see how they struggle if you shop at a high volume store, because I guarantee it'll be pretty funny. So wow, I went on a lot longer than I thought I would. That is how we dealt with overstock at GameStop. Those are the different types of overstock. Sometimes we get overstock of new stuff. Most of the time, we could kind of deal with it because our new drawers were a lot less crammed than our used. And with overstock of systems, we would just kind of have to get creative in the back room, which kind of make Tetris out of it. And that was overstock. So I hope this episode was interesting. I know it wasn't like customers puking or just horrible things. It was just kind of, what is it like? Because there are so many different types of overstock at GameStop, it kind of makes it unique. So I hope that's kind of interesting. I don't know what it's like nowadays. Now there's a bunch of toys. There's probably just messes in the back room. I'm glad I don't have to deal with it anymore. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys liked it. Definitely leave a like down below. Comment down below of either watching an employee, if you've ever seen an employee have to like cram a game into the thing, or if you've noticed them trying to yank the game out that you wanted, or I don't know, if you have experience with overstock at whatever store you work at, or if you work at GameStop and you have to deal with the toys now in overstock, because I can't even imagine what you guys do with those. And as always, everyone, even if you are one of those stores that has to deal with toys overstock, or you work in a store with just horrible overstock, have a fantastic day. See you guys. Like I said, this was the second time I shot this video, so if I repeated myself, I'm sorry. I just kept trying to think of, did I say that already? Oh, I technically might have, but it might not have been in this recording. I don't know. Oh, God. I don't know how many times I repeated myself. Hopefully I catch all of them in the editing process.